In the vast expanse of the galaxy, a crisis was brewing. The Stellar Concordance, an alliance of advanced alien civilizations, faced a problem that threatened to unravel their entire existence. Hyun Park sat in the massive conference chamber, surrounded by representatives from 12 different alien species, each looking more worried than the last. The room was tense, filled with holographic displays showing complex calculations and intricate diagrams. At the center of the chamber, a massive three-dimensional model showed a quantum barrier that seemed impossible to penetrate. This barrier was more than just a scientific challenge. It was a threat to the entire galactic community. Jae Kim, the lead researcher, looked exhausted. His fingers moved rapidly across the holographic interface, trying yet another approach to solve the impossible problem. Beside him, alien scientists from different worlds huddled together, their various appendages and communication devices working in frantic sync. The quantum barrier had appeared suddenly, blocking a critical trade route that connected multiple star systems. It wasn't just a simple obstruction. It was a complex network of quantum entanglements that defied all known scientific understanding. Entire civilizations depended on this trade route, and now everything was at a standstill. "We've tried everything," Jay muttered, frustration clear in his voice. Different alien species had contributed their most advanced technologies, their most brilliant minds. Quantum computers from the crystal worlds of Nexus 9, neural networks from the biomechanical civilization of Cairo, and computational systems from the energy-based life forms of the stellar rim. All had failed. Yoon Lee, the senior diplomatic representative, watched the proceedings with growing concern. Her species was known for their strategic thinking, but even they were out of options. The quantum barrier seemed to adapt to every approach, shifting and changing like a living puzzle that was always one step ahead. The conference chamber fell, silent. 12 different alien species, each with technologies far beyond human understanding, had been reduced to complete helplessness. Trillions of lives and entire economic systems hung in the balance. "We might," Yoon said quietly, breaking the silence, "need to call the humans." A collective groan echoed through the chamber. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, a young species with limited technological advancement compared to the others. They were considered unpredictable, chaotic, and somewhat primitive by the standards of the Stellar Concordance. But something about human problem-solving was different. They approached challenges with a creativity that seemed almost random, yet surprisingly effective. Where other species saw rigid scientific principles, humans saw opportunities to break rules and think differently. Jae Kim looked up from his calculations. "Humans? We've exhausted every known scientific approach. What could they possibly do that we haven't already tried?" Yoon Lee's expression was calm. She had seen humans solve problems that seemed impossible to other species. Their ability to think outside conventional boundaries was both their greatest weakness and their most extraordinary strength. The holographic display continued to show the quantum barrier, a swirling, complex network of energy and quantum entanglements that seemed to mock the assembled scientists. Terabytes of data scrolled past, showing failed attempt after failed attempt to breach or understand the barrier. Representatives from different alien species began to argue. Some were completely against involving humans, seeing them as a backward species. Others saw it as a last desperate measure. The debate grew heated, with multiple translation devices working overtime to facilitate communication. Yoon Lee waited patiently. She knew that eventually, they would have no choice. The quantum barrier was more than just a scientific problem. It was an existential threat to the entire galactic community. As the arguments continued, the barrier remained. Unchanging, unyielding. A complex puzzle that had defeated the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. "Contact the humans," Yoon finally said, her voice cutting through the arguments. "Prepare a delegation, and hope that their unique perspective might be what we need." The chamber fell silent. The fate of multiple civilizations now rested on the shoulders of a species most considered barely capable of interstellar travel. The human delegation arrived quietly, almost unnoticed. Wu Choi and Su Jin stepped into the research center, their casual appearance a stark contrast to the highly sophisticated alien scientists surrounding them. Wu wore a simple blue jacket, while Su Jin carried a small bag that looked more like a standard-issue laptop case than advanced technological equipment. The alien scientists watched them with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Dr. Kang, the lead physicist, had read the human files multiple times. Their species was young, their technology seemingly primitive compared to the advanced civilizations of the stellar concordance. Yet something about their records suggested an unpredictable problem-solving approach. So, Wu said, examining the complex holographic models of the quantum barrier, this is the problem nobody could solve? Dr. Kang's tentacle-like appendages moved nervously. We've analyzed this barrier from every possible angle. Quantum computational methods, multidimensional, scanning energy pattern disruption. Nothing works. Su Jin stepped closer to the holographic display. Her eyes moved quickly, scanning the intricate quantum patterns. Most scientists would see a complex, impenetrable network. She saw something different. Have you tried treating it like a complex network instead of a solid barrier? She asked casually. The room fell silent. Alien scientists exchanged confused glances. Their most advanced computational systems had treated the barrier as a fixed structure, applying standard quantum mechanics principles. The humans were suggesting something entirely different. Dr. Kang's translation device struggled to process the simplicity of the question. What do you mean? He asked, his voice a mix of frustration and genuine curiosity. Wu pulled out a small tablet, a device that looked almost laughably simple compared to the advanced holographic interfaces around him. He began sketching something that looked like a network diagram, using basic lines and circles. Think of it like an internet connection, Wu explained. When you have a network blockage, you don't just try to break through. You find alternative paths, create new connections. The alien scientists looked confused. Their understanding of networks was based on complex quantum entanglement principles. The human approach seemed almost childishly simple. Su Jin connected her tablet to the main research console. Her fingers moved quickly, creating a series of computational models that seemed to dance around the existing barrier algorithms. Where alien scientists saw walls, she saw potential pathways. Every barrier has weak points, she explained. Not physical weak points, connection points. Places where the network can be redirected. Dr. Kang watched in amazement. The humans weren't trying to break the barrier. They were trying to understand its fundamental structure, treating it like a living, adaptable system rather than a fixed obstacle. Hours passed. The research center buzzed with a new kind of energy. Alien scientists who had been defeated by the quantum barrier now watched the humans with growing interest. Wu and Su Jin worked together, their communication seamless, their approach unconventional. They didn't use advanced quantum computers. They used basic computational models, network theory, and what seemed like intuitive problem-solving. They asked questions that seemed almost too simple to be relevant. What if the barrier isn't blocking us, Wu would ask. What if it's trying to communicate? What if we're looking at it wrong? Su Jin would respond. The alien scientists began to realize something fundamental about human problem-solving. They didn't see obstacles. They saw puzzles. They didn't accept limitations. They created solutions. As the first day of human intervention came to an end, something unexpected began to happen. Small cracks appeared in the quantum barrier's computational model. Nothing significant. Just tiny, almost invisible changes. But for the first time since the barrier's appearance, something was different. Dr. Kang looked at Wu and Su Jin. They weren't celebrating. They were analyzing, thinking, preparing for the next step. Days turned into weeks. The research center hummed with a strange new energy. Wu and Su Jin's approach continued to challenge everything the stellar concordance understood about scientific problem-solving. Rim, the senior alien scientist, slammed his communication device on the table. This is impossible, he argued, his multiple eyes blinking with frustration. Your methods defy our most advanced scientific principles. Su Jin, simply shrugged. Sometimes the solution isn't about having the most advanced technology. It's about looking at the problem differently. The quantum barrier was slowly revealing its secrets. Where previous teams had seen a solid wall of impossible quantum entanglements, the human team saw a complex network with potential weak points. They weren't trying to break through the barrier. They were learning its language. Wu's computational models looked almost childishly simple compared to the advanced alien systems. He used basic network diagrams, color-coded charts, and what appeared to be hand-drawn notes. The alien scientists found it maddening and, increasingly, fascinating. "Look," Wu would explain, pointing to a seemingly random connection on his diagram. "Every system has a rhythm. You just need to understand its pattern." Dr. Kang watched in growing amazement. The humans weren't using complex quantum algorithms or advanced energy manipulation techniques. They were using something far more fundamental: creative thinking. Resistance came quickly and from multiple directions. The Stellar Concordance Scientific Council held emergency meetings. Representatives from 12 different alien civilizations argued about the human approach. Most believed it was a waste of time. "They're using technology that's centuries behind our basic research tools," one representative complained. "Their methods are too simple to be effective," another added. But small changes were happening. The quantum barrier began to show microscopic fluctuations. Nothing major, but enough to suggest that the human approach might be working. Su Jin spent hours analyzing the barrier's response patterns. She created what looked like a simple spreadsheet, tracking tiny changes that other scientists had overlooked. Where advanced quantum computers saw uniform resistance, she saw subtle variations. "It's like a language," she told Wu. "We're not trying to break it. We're trying to understand it." The breakthrough came unexpectedly. During a routine analysis, Wu noticed a pattern that everyone else had missed. The barrier wasn't a solid structure. It was a dynamic system with its own internal communication network. "It's alive," he realized. "Not literally alive, but adaptive. It responds. It communicates." The alien scientists were skeptical. Their entire understanding of quantum mechanics suggested that the barrier was a fixed, immovable structure. The humans were suggesting something entirely different, that it was more like a living, breathing system. Rim continued to resist. "These are children's drawings," he would say, pointing at Wu's diagrams. "Not scientific research." But the cracks in the barrier continued to grow. Tiny at first, almost invisible, but definitely present. The research center became a battleground of ideas. Traditional alien scientists fought against the human approach. Debates became heated. Some wanted to remove the human team entirely. Others began to see the potential of their unique perspective. Dr. Kang found himself in the middle of this scientific revolution. He watched the humans work, their approach both frustrating and intriguing. They didn't follow any standard scientific protocol. They asked questions that seemed naive but were surprisingly insightful. "What if we're not seeing the whole picture?" Su Jin would ask. "What if the barrier is trying to tell us something?" Wu would respond. As the weeks progressed, the quantum barrier began to change, not break, not collapse, but transform. The first real evidence that the human approach might actually work emerged. The stellar concordance held its breath. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy watched as two humans used seemingly simple methods to challenge everything they thought they knew about science, technology, and problem-solving. Yun Park watched as the human team began implementing their solution. What seemed like a crude, almost primitive approach was systematically dismantling the most complex barrier in galactic history. Wu and Su Jin worked with a calm precision that confused the alien scientists. They didn't use massive quantum computers or complex energy manipulation systems. Instead, they used simple tools, basic computational models, and what appeared to be an almost intuitive understanding of the barrier's internal structure. "We're not breaking it," Wu explained to Dr. Kang. "We're communicating with it." The implementation began slowly. Small adjustments to the quantum barrier's internal network, tiny redirections of energy patterns. Each change was carefully monitored by the alien scientific team, who expected the entire approach to fail at any moment. But it didn't fail. Alien technicians worked alongside the humans, their initial skepticism gradually transforming into genuine admiration. Sujin's approach was almost like solving a complex puzzle. She treated the quantum barrier as a living system, something to be understood rather than conquered. "Look at how it responds," she would say, pointing to subtle changes in the holographic display. "It's not resisting, it's communicating." The barrier began to change. Not collapse, not break, but transform. Where once it had been a solid, impenetrable wall of quantum entanglements, it now showed flexibility. Pathways began to appear, subtle at first, then more defined. Rim, the senior scientist who had been the most vocal critic, found himself watching in silent amazement. The human method defied everything he understood about quantum mechanics. They weren't using advanced scientific principles. They were using something far more fundamental: creative problem-solving. Days turned into weeks. The implementation continued. Each small adjustment created new possibilities. The trade route that had been blocked for months began to show signs of potential reopening. "How are you doing this?" Dr. Kang asked, his translation device struggling to capture the mixture of frustration and admiration in his voice. Wu grinned. "We're treating it like a conversation," he explained. "Not a fight, not a problem to be solved, but a dialogue." The alien scientists found this approach maddeningly simple, yet incredibly complex. Humans were using an approach that combined intuition, creativity, and basic scientific principles in a way no other civilization had considered. The implementation revealed something extraordinary. The quantum barrier wasn't a weapon or a deliberate obstruction. It was a complex communication system that had been misunderstood by every previous civilization. Sujin's computational models showed intricate patterns that previous scientific approaches had completely missed. She saw connections where others saw only resistance. Her approach was less about breaking through and more about understanding. "Every system has a language," she would explain. "We just need to learn how to listen." The stellar concordance watched in growing excitement. The trade route that had been blocked for months was slowly becoming accessible. Not through force, not through advanced technology, but through understanding. Alien species began to realize something fundamental about human problem-solving. They didn't see obstacles. They saw opportunities. They didn't accept limitations. They created solutions. Wu continued to modify the barrier's internal network. Each adjustment was careful, precise, almost gentle. It was like watching someone negotiate with a living system rather than trying to destroy it. "We're not fighting," he would say. "We're understanding." The implementation reached a critical point. The quantum barrier began to reshape itself, not because it was being attacked, but because it was being understood. Dr. Kang watched in amazement as the first ships prepared to pass through the previously impenetrable barrier. The human team stood quietly, their approach having transformed what seemed like an impossible obstacle into a passageway. "How did you even conceive of this?" Dr. Kang asked, his voice a mixture of wonder and confusion. Wu grinned. "We humans are good at solving problems nobody else thinks can be solved." The barrier continued to transform. The trade route began to open, and everything was about to change. The quantum barrier collapsed, but not with violence or destruction. It dissolved like morning mist, revealing pathways that no one had seen before. The galaxy held its breath. Yun Li stood in the central command center, watching as the first trade ships passed through the previously impossible route. Beside her, Wu and Sujin looked calm, almost uninterested in the historical moment they had just created. The stellar concordance was transforming. What had been a rigid, hierarchical system of advanced civilizations was now facing a fundamental shift. Humans, once considered the newest and least developed species, had just solved a problem that had defeated the most advanced technologies in the galaxy. Alien representatives from 12 different civilizations watched in stunned silence. The quantum barrier, that impossible, complex network that had blocked critical trade routes for months, was now nothing more than a memory. Dr. Kang approached Wu, his multiple appendages moving nervously. "How did you do this?" he asked, a mixture of frustration and genuine curiosity in his voice. Wu shrugged. "We just looked at the problem differently," he said simply. The transformation wasn't just about reopening a trade route, it was about changing how entire civilizations understood problem solving. Humans had shown that advanced technology wasn't always the answer. Sometimes creativity and simple thinking could solve what complex systems could not. Sujin reviewed the final computational models. What had taken months of work looked almost disappointingly simple now. A few key insights, some creative thinking, the ability to see connections where others saw only barriers. Diplomatic meetings began immediately. The stellar concordance needed to understand how two humans had accomplished what thousands of their most advanced scientists could not. Representatives from different alien worlds studied the human approach, trying to understand its magic. "It's not magic," Sujin would explain patiently. "It's just looking at problems from a different angle." The recognition came quickly. Research grants, diplomatic invitations, scientific collaborations. Humans were suddenly in high demand. The young species that had been considered barely capable of interstellar travel was now seen as a critical problem-solving resource. Yoon Lee raised a glass in a celebratory toast. "To the humans," she said, "who do what no one else could." Wu and Sujin exchanged a knowing smile. They weren't interested in celebrations or recognition. They were already thinking about the next problem to solve. The trade routes reopened, fully. Entire economic systems that had been paralyzed began to move again. The quantum barrier that had seemed impossible now seemed like a distant memory. Rim, the senior scientist who had been most critical of the human approach, now found himself studying their methods. What he had once considered simple and naive now seemed brilliantly innovative. They didn't fight the system, he told other scientists. They understood it. News spread quickly across the galaxy. Humans had done something extraordinary, not through advanced technology, not through force, but through understanding and creative thinking. The stellar concordance was changing. Humans were no longer seen as the newest, least developed species. They were now recognized as the most adaptable, most innovative civilization in the known universe. Wu looked at the final computational models. What had seemed like an impossible challenge was now a solved problem. Just another puzzle they had worked through. "What's next?" Sujin asked. Wu grinned. "Something interesting, I hope." In research centers across the galaxy, alien scientists began to study human problem-solving methods. Books would be written, conferences would be held, entire scientific approaches would be reimagined. The quantum barrier was gone, but something much bigger had been created. A new understanding of what it meant to solve a problem.